Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Dr. Dalia Saleh, Professor of Anatomy at Human Anatomy and the Embryology Department, Mansoura University, Egypt. Today, inshallah, we will discuss the arterial supply of the gastrointestinal tract. The learning outcome of our lecture today will cover the following points. We will discuss and identify the arteries supplying the gastrointestinal tract and demonstrate their branches, and name the structure supplied by these branches. And finally, we will talk a little bit about the site of the arterial anastomosis between these branches. Let's start first with the abdominal aorta, which is the main arterial supply for the gastrointestinal tract. The abdominal aorta begins as a continuation of the descending thoracic aorta. It enters the abdomen through the aortic orifice of the diaphragm at the level of the last thoracic vertebra. Then it descends vertically downward, slightly to the left of the midline and of course to the left of the inferior vena cava, and then terminates at the level of the fourth lumbar vertebra by dividing into right and left common iliac arteries. So if we want to label this picture, we have here the diaphragm. This is the inferior vena cava opening, the esophageal opening, and here is the aortic orifice. So this is the abdominal aorta. It lies to the left of the inferior vena cava. At the level of L4, it divides into right and left common iliac arteries. The arteries of the gastrointestinal tract are three single branches that arise from the front of the abdominal aorta. Namely, we have the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. As you know from the embryology lectures, that the gastrointestinal tract and its derivatives are divided into three main parts. We have the foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut. The foregut include the esophagus, the stomach, the upper half of the duodenum till the opening of the hepatopancreatic duct, and the accessory organs that related to the foregut. We have the liver, the gallbladder, the spleen, the pancreas, body, tail, and the upper part of the head of the pancreas. The midgut starts from the lower half of the duodenum, from the entrance of the hepatopancreatic duct downward, the rest of the small intestine, the jejunum and the ileum, the beginning of the large intestine, which is the cecum and the appendix, also the ascending colon, the hepatic flexure or right colic flexure, and the right 2/3 of the transverse colon. And then we have the hindgut, which is formed of the left third of the transverse colon, the left colic flexure or the splenic flexure, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the upper part of the anal canal. This is the hindgut. So we have three main arteries supplying the GIT. The celiac trunk supplies the foregut, the superior mesenteric artery supplies the midgut, and the inferior mesenteric artery supplies the hindgut. Let's start first with the celiac trunk. The celiac trunk is a short, wide artery, about half an inch in length, in حوالي 1.25 centimeter. It arises from the front of the abdominal aorta, immediately below its orifice in the diaphragm, almost at the disc between T12 and L1 vertebrae. It divides into three main branches. The smallest one is the left gastric artery, here. Larger than the left gastric artery is the common hepatic artery, goes to the right side, and the largest branch is called the splenic artery. The left gastric artery first passes upwards and to the left till it reaches the cardiac end of the stomach, and then turns downward and to the left along the lesser curvature of the stomach. It gives at the cardiac end the esophageal branches to the esophagus, and along the lesser curvature of the stomach it gives the gastric branches to the stomach. The second branch is the common hepatic artery. It first runs to the right to reach the upper surface of the first part of the duodenum, and then turns upward on the free margin of the lesser omentum, or the peritoneal fold that connects the stomach to the liver, and here it changes its name into the hepatic artery proper. The hepatic artery proper, on its way upward towards the liver, it lies in front of the portal vein and to the left of the common bile duct. When the hepatic artery proper reaches the hilum of the liver, it divides into left and right hepatic arteries to supply the loops of the liver, and from the right hepatic artery another small branch called the cystic artery arises from it to supply the gallbladder. The common hepatic artery, or the parent artery again, gives rise to the following branches: the gastroduodenal artery, the right gastric artery, and of course its continuation, which is called the hepatic artery proper. The gastroduodenal artery here, it arises from the common hepatic artery and then passes behind the first part of the duodenum to reach its lower border, and then divides into the right gastroepiploic branch, which runs along the greater curvature of the stomach and gives branches to both supply the stomach and also the greater omentum. That's why it is called gastroepiploic. Gastro means stomach, epiploic means omentum or peritoneum. Another branch from the gastroduodenal artery is the superior pancreatico-duodenal artery. It supplies the upper part of the duodenum above the level of the hepatopancreatic duct and also the upper half of the head of the pancreas. The other branch from the common hepatic artery is the right gastric artery. Here, it turns to the left and runs upwards on the lesser curvature of the stomach to anastomose with the left gastric artery. And both arteries supply the stomach. So again, the common hepatic artery gives the following branches: gastroduodenal, the right gastric, and its continuation is called the hepatic artery proper, which gives the following branches: the right and left hepatic arteries and the cystic artery from the right hepatic artery. The last branch from the celiac trunk is the splenic artery, which is the largest of the three branches of the celiac trunk. It is tortuous. It first runs horizontally along the upper border of the body and tail of the pancreas. On its way to the spleen, it crosses the left suprarenal gland, the left kidney, and then pass inside the lienorenal ligament to enter the hilum of the spleen and divide into many segmental splenic branches to supply the spleen. Along its course, it gives the following branches. Of course, it gives the pancreatic branches to the pancreas except the head. So it gives branches to the body and tail of the pancreas. And also, before it enters the spleen, it gives what is called the short gastric arteries, 3 to 7 in number, and they supply the fundus of the stomach. They are related to the greater curvature of the stomach, and they supply the fundus of the stomach here. And also, it gives another branch called left gastroepiploic artery. It runs along the greater curvature of the stomach and anastomoses with the right gastroepiploic artery and supplies also the stomach and the greater omentum. The second artery that supplies the GIT is the superior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery, as we can see here in this diagram, it arises from the front of the abdominal aorta, just 1 centimeter below the origin of the celiac trunk at the level of first lumbar vertebra. At its origin, it is sandwiched or lies between two veins, the splenic vein above it and the left renal vein below it. It crosses in front of the uncinate process of the head of the pancreas and also in front of the third part of the duodenum. It may compress it and causing problems with the motility of the small intestine. And then it enters the root of the mesentery and pass between its two layers. The superior mesenteric artery finally reaches the right iliac fossa, where it terminates by anastomosing with one of its branches, which is the iliocolic artery. Throughout its course, we can see the superior mesenteric vein on its right side, but it is not shown here in this diagram. For the branches of the superior mesenteric artery, we have the following. The first branch is called the inferior pancreatico-duodenal artery. From its name, it will supply the lower half of the duodenum and the lower half of the head of the pancreas. Then we have another branch to the transverse colon called the middle colic artery. And then we have the right colic artery to the ascending colon. And we have the iliocolic artery. From its name, again, it will supply the terminal part of the ileum and the beginning of the colon, which is the cecum, the appendix as well. And we have another group of arteries from the left side of the superior mesenteric artery. They are called the jejunal and ileal branches to supply the rest of the small intestine. And notice the following. All the branches from the superior mesenteric artery arise from its right side, except the jejunal and ileal branches arises from the left side of the superior mesenteric artery. Since the superior mesenteric artery supplies the midgut, so it supplies all the structures derived from the midgut, as the lower half of the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum, the cecum, the appendix, the ascending colon, the right colic flexure or the hepatic flexure, and the right 2/3 of the transverse colon, and of course the lower half of the head of the pancreas. Lastly, we have the third branch, which supplies the GIT, which is the inferior mesenteric artery. It arises from the front of the abdominal aorta about 4 cm above its bifurcation, almost at the level of the third lumbar vertebra. It runs downward and to the left, so it crosses the left common iliac artery behind the peritoneum, medial to the ureter. Here is the ureter, and then goes downward to reach the rectum and changes its name into the superior rectal artery. It gives the following branches. It gives the left colic artery to supply the remaining left third of the transverse colon, the left colic flexure or the splenic flexure, and also the descending colon. Then it gives like 2 or 3 sigmoidal arteries to supply the sigmoid colon or the pelvic colon, and then itself carry on or continue as the superior rectal artery. Since the inferior mesenteric artery is the artery of the hind gut, so it supplies the following structures: the left 1/3 of the transverse colon, the descending and sigmoid colon, and the rectum, plus the upper part of the anal canal. Now let's check the arterial anastomosis, the site of the arterial anastomosis in the GIT, and also the name of the branches forming this anastomosis. We can see here, this is the abdominal aorta, gives the right and left common iliac arteries, and each common iliac artery will give us the external iliac and the internal iliac branches. We have 3 main arteries which arise from the front of the abdominal aorta, single branches. We have the celiac trunk, below it the superior mesenteric artery, and below them the inferior mesenteric artery. The first anastomosis between the celiac trunk and the superior mesenteric artery, we can see it at two sides, at the head of the pancreas, between the superior and the inferior pancreaticoduodenal arteries. Remember that the superior pancreaticoduodenal artery arises from the gastroduodenal artery, which is a branch of the common hepatic artery, which is a branch from the celiac trunk. And from below, it meets the inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery, which is a branch of the superior mesenteric artery. The other site of anastomosis at the body and tail of the pancreas, between the pancreatic arteries. Second place of anastomosis, or the second anastomosis between the superior mesenteric artery branches and the inferior mesenteric artery branches, we can see it at the transverse colon and at the descending colon, between the middle colic artery from the superior mesenteric and the left colic artery from the inferior mesenteric. And to understand this, we need to know an artery, important artery, called the marginal artery, which runs along the mesenteric border of the large intestine. It is the connection between all the colic arteries, the ileocolic, the right colic, the middle colic from the superior mesenteric, and also the left colic and the sigmoidal arteries from the inferior mesenteric. So here at the transverse colon and the descending colon, we can see the anastomosis between the branches from the superior mesenteric arteries through the middle colic and the branch that supply the rest of the transverse colon and descending colon, which is the left colic artery. It's an important anastomosis here. Also, the final place of anastomosis between the inferior mesenteric artery itself through the superior rectal artery. Remember that the superior rectal artery is the continuation of the inferior mesenteric artery. And the internal iliac artery, which gives other rectal arteries that supply the rectum. So we have anastomosis between the inferior mesenteric artery and the internal iliac artery through the branches that supply the rectum itself. To summarize the lecture, we should know the following data or information. The gastrointestinal tract and its derivatives are divided embryologically into three parts: the foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut. During development, the abdominal aorta gives rise to three single branches from its anterior aspect. These branches will supply the GIT. We have the celiac trunk for the foregut, the superior mesenteric artery for the midgut, and the inferior mesenteric artery for the hindgut. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening. If you like it, please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.